Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Exhibit A Attorneys, where I interview attorneys and other experts across the country about what it truly takes to be the Exhibit A of a successful lawyer. Today's meeting chat is a little bit different. We're talking with Tom Lambotte about cybersecurity threats in 2022. So while this probably won't make you a better lawyer, it will certainly keep your firm open, prevent you from having bar complaints, getting scared poopless, and a number of other things that we often deal with, getting held for ransom with our stuff or violating client confidentiality through spyware and whatnot along those lines. So certainly a very interesting and important chat. Excuse me. For those of you that don't already know, Tom Lambotte, he's a cybersecurity expert who's been in the tech support industry for over a decade. He founded Beauregard in 2019, which offers a suite of turnkey solutions to help protect solo lawyers and small firms from getting hacked. In addition to that, he's the CEO and founder of Global Mac IT, an established managed service provider specializing in serving lawyers nationwide who use Macs by implementing his proven process. Tom's mission is to help entrepreneurs grow by leveraging technology. He has taken it upon himself to be a hero to lawyers running solo and small firms at the intersection of technology adoption, efficiency, and security. Beauregard was born out of that passion to make the latest cybersecurity solutions accessible and affordable to all lawyers, not just those fancy pants, big law people. Fancy pants was my addition, not Tom's, so don't worry. If that's not enough, Tom's the author of the ABA's Max in Law and has been widely published by legal industry print and online publications. He also authored Hassle-Free Mac IT Support for Law Firms and Legal Boost, Big Profits Through an IT Transformation. Tom's weekly blog, this is a tongue twister, Stupid Simple Security Tips, provides actionable and simplified strategies to protect solo lawyers and small firms from getting hacked. He lights up a room with his contagious charm and love for all things family. He may be the proud dad of 4 sweet kids and 2 cute French bulldog puppies and husband to his fantastic wife, but he lives an adventurous lifestyle as well. Every day brings new adventures in, is it Chardon? Chardon?
Yeah. Yep. Chardon, Ohio.
Chardon, Ohio, where you can find this active family man at home foraging for mushrooms, probably not the psychedelic kind, or out exploring hiking trails near the Lake Erie coastline, or if that's not enough, sampling the best ice cream shops in Chagrin Falls with his family. Tom, welcome, man.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat about the cybersecurity threats in 2022, the best practice for solo and small firm owners. I joked leaving your password on a Post-it note on your screen is probably one of the things you'll talk about not doing.
hmm
So
Yeah, you definitely want to put it in your drawer instead of
Oh,
having it on your monitor.
there we go. I love it. All right, we're going to dive into that in a second, but first I want to talk about our last episode. Most recently, we had Stacey Brown Randall on. Stacey Brown Randall trains people on how to get referrals without asking. So obviously, from a lawyer perspective, where we can't solicit business, this becomes huge. So she talked to us about the layered strategy to referrals that every law firm should have. And so we talked about the foundational ones and some of the things that can be added off of that last week. Great episode. Highly recommend it for anybody who's referral focused. But now that we're done with that, I want to dive into cybersecurity because, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, this becomes more and more of an issue every year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think 3, 4 years ago, the ABA Tech Report was, said 23% of lawyers have been breached, then 26%, then I think it was 28% now. So it's not slowing down, and the tools are just getting more and more advanced. I'm sure everyone's well aware that the phishing emails of today are nothing compared to what they were 5 years ago, when they had super pixelated logos and horrible broken English and all that. Nowadays, today's cyber criminals are also using Grammarly, a wonderful spelling tool, right? They can choose American dialect, they can choose British dialect, right? So they've got, they're getting more advanced, so it's not going to slow down or go away anytime soon.
Yeah, I love one of our former guests and somebody I always enjoy following, Davina Frederick, shared a obviously fake message from the FBI. Like literally it started with a parenthesis that was like, this is not fake, it is real, we assure you, close paren, just to convince you that of course it was real because that's how the FBI emails you. But like I think that's the exception. Now I think what you said is so true. Like these are getting more and more accurate, advanced, specific.
Extremely advanced. Yeah, there's some story. There's a story I share, quite often with one of our clients. He had gone through a course of mine a few years back, and so, small firm, and when he found out we were doing Beauregard, he booked a time to meet with me, and he had canceled it 3 times. Right. Usually that's like the death blow for me, but I really like the guy. And then he sent me an email in October of last year. He said, Tom, we almost got hacked. Our opposing counsel's email was hacked. And so he got an email from his opposing counsel, pretending to be that person, said, "Hey, we had, something to the note. I just sent a document. It's tied to your credentials. Please log in and let me know your thoughts as soon as you can." And the crazy thing, he was actively working with his opposing counsel. So it wasn't an email totally out of the blue. Sometimes you get phishing emails. You're like, this person's ever emailed me in their life, and it's not legit. Um, but in this case, so he wrote back. He's like, "Oh, it looks kind of fishy." So I wrote back. He said, "No, I'd rather if you can just send the file directly." 2 minutes later, he gets a reply. He says, "No, no, I assure you it's good. Yeah, go ahead and check it out and let me know what you think." So again, there's actually someone there sitting in your inbox actively replying when you have no clue it's happening. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when someone breached your email account, you'd know because all of your friends would get offers for Viagra, and it would be embarrassing, right? But today they don't do that. When they get access to your email account, they sit there and they do some research. They go into your inbox, they go into your recently sent messages. That indexing feature we all depend on tremendously is wonderful for cyber criminals. They can type in password and routing number and bank transfer, social security number. But wait, some of you guys are really sharp. So you would never send an email, writing out password if you send the password that one time. So you put PW. Right. They're going to search for PW. They're instantly going to find the passwords you sent that one or those two, three times. And then, once they've done kind of their recognition, they pulled out anything that's valuable, then they can find ways where they can interject themselves into certain discussions and play on the familiarity and using the same email signature and all that, to get your credentials and then keep it going and do it for you and then your friends.
And obviously, excuse me, like from the lawyer perspective, we have the heightened ethical rules. I know, I guess it depends on the state, but I know like Florida has a mandatory requirement if a certain number of files get compromised. But also, you're dealing with like really high financial amounts, and so like I could totally see some of these people getting into one of those email chains on like a big PI case and saying like, "All right, fine, we'll meet your offer. Wire the money to so and so in the next 24 hours, and we'll accept less than we've been asking," and then have it go somewhere totally different.
And that happens all the time. Another one of our clients down in Boca Raton, also in Florida, funny enough, it's always Florida man. Um,
I don't know if that was a compliment or an insult to me as a born and raised Florida man.
well, the Florida man, jokes. It's always like Florida man, gets
So it
punched in
was
the face by
alligator
a
into
12-foot
oncoming
alligator.
hurricane, and yeah.
Yeah. Um, but he, and they actually were extremely lucky. Personal injury firm, about 10 people. Um, and they were notified that their IOTA funds were almost transferred out of their bank account to an account in Hong Kong. They were extremely lucky. The FBI was actually able to stop and intercept it. The FBI or the bank, whoever it was. But essentially, the FBI came back and they're like, "This never happens." The amount of times we're able to stop when these transfers happen is maybe 1 out of 100. So he was extremely lucky. That being said, he wasn't out of the woodworks. He still had to send, the notice of a data breach letter to every single contact in his database, not just clients, but judges, opposing counsel, referral sources, your trusted network, everybody. And he told me, he's like, "Tom, you can't imagine the carnage that does to a practice to have to go through that and send out that letter." And he's like, "Tom, the phone stopped ringing. I mean, for months, their call volume, everything just tanked, and it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fortunately, he's an extremely savvy entrepreneurial attorney, and he was able to kind of come back. But there's a reason. I think it's 60% of firms get the death blow after going through an occurrence like this. Within 6 months, 60% of businesses shut down. So it's a crazy world out there.
Yeah. I mean, different, and I guess moderately funny story. So my mother-in-law just retired. She was an ER nurse for like 40 years. At one point, the hospital got hacked, so they had all the medical record stuff, hidden. Which that's not the funny part. The funny part is she was the only one on staff that knew how to do paper files anymore. So they had her work like all overtime to train everybody how to like keep medical records going, because you can't just not do all this stuff. But everybody got so used to computers, so while the computers were locked out, nobody else knew how to chart stuff. Uh,
Oh,
it's crazy to see, we there's a comedian that's got the joke, like, we spent so long trying to make a computer seem like a man, and now we spend so much time telling the computer that we're human to let us through the captcha check or whatever it is.
yeah, those darn letters, the fuzzy letters, that are impossible to get the first time, and yeah.
So, look, I think anybody listening to this is smart enough to know that this is a threat, to know it's an issue, to know they want to avoid it. What are some of like the easiest, quickest, low hanging fruit best practices for them to, stay on the right side of all these issues?
So hands down, number one is 2FA, MFA, multi-factor authentication, or most commonly known as two-factor authentication. It still blows my mind how many people don't have this turned on for their essential services is kind of their bare minimum. Like, yeah, in an ideal world, you've got two-factor authentication on everything, but that's completely overwhelming, and most people can't go from zero to everything. So what I usually recommend is, hey, bare minimum, first one to do, like today, right now, like pull over in your car, turn on your hotspot, take on your laptop, and turn on two-factor authentication for your email, because that is the doorway to everything. When someone accesses your email, boom, one of the most common things they'll do, they'll turn on an auto forward. So if people like try to tell you like, hey, Jordan, I think your email has been hacked, boom, it's automatically forwarded and deleted from your inbox. So they can keep working and you don't see those things happening. If they have access to your email, they can try to log into your, Box or your Clio account, hit reset password, and boom, the reset password link is going to conveniently come into your email's inbox. And now they've got access to Clio. And so they can just really quickly unlock all the doors. Your QuickBooks, same thing. They're going to take your primary email address, try to log in a QuickBooks, say reset password, and it's going to send a link. So all these, the hub of it all is your email. So you've got to have two-factor authentication on your email at a bare minimum, but don't stop there. Kind of the short list that I always come up with, your financial software, QuickBooks, Zero, two-factor authentication. Your file storage, if you're not using OneDrive, if you're using, Dropbox for Business or Box or, whatever else service you're using, you've got to have two-factor authentication for your file storage. Case management software is the other obvious one. And those kind of make up the top five, or maybe that was four. But essentially, the exercise to go through is what service, if breached, would end up with me, being screwed and losing a whole lot of sleep. Make that list and then, take a half hour or an hour and go and turn on two-factor authentication for all of them, because it just makes it, extremely more secure.
Well, and from the case management standpoint, for the most part, you've got some sort of integrated payment processing as well. So once they're in there, it'd be really easy for them to just start charging, change the bank that the stuff goes through, start charging
Mhm.
client files or whatnot. No, I think that's great stuff. And then I will say, so from my perspective as the firm owner, business owner, I always like we do like if somebody's going to change a password to something because we'll have most people have access to whatever it is. Let everybody know beforehand, ideally in like a face-to-face Zoom meeting or an office meeting, as opposed to that also coming through email. So that way, when you get like, hey, did you mean to change your password? Click here to lock everything. Okay, yeah, we did update the whatever. The most recent one for me, my Instagram got hacked, which I have no idea how or why, but somebody wanted extra followers, so I bear the brunt of that for a little bit.
hmm
But it was
You know,
interesting to see.
and there's advertising. If they can get out, they can put out ads to your entire, readership and followers, and yeah, there's all kinds of nefarious reasons they do what they do.
Sell people the best crypto forex trading tips in the world and whatever else is making its round these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple numbers game. They know that out of every, 1,000 emails or 1,000 people they contact, X amount is going to lead, they know exactly what their ROI, what their metrics are. And it's just a numbers game. So, and nowadays they're leveraging, the same way that many of us are leveraging automation, and, different tools that can help us do things at scale, without physically having to do it. They're doing the same thing. And so I think it's really important to understand kind of the mindset and what the day of a cyber criminal looks like, because I think one of the biggest issues is the majority of solo attorneys truly still do not believe they are at risk. It's kind of like I think it was the 80s when they really started to push seat belts. They'd been around for a long time, but no one wore them. It's like, yeah, I believe in seat belts, but I'm not going to wear it. I don't care. I'm not going to get an accident. I'm not at risk, and it's really a mindset thing. It's kind of sad. Initially, I really built BobaGuard specifically for solos because I was like, wow, there's 500,000 attorneys in the U.S., solo attorneys in the U.S. that literally don't have access to all of these really powerful and effective cybersecurity solutions. right? And that was my kind of why. I started digging around and looking for resources I could point solo attorneys that were too small to work with it, for us at Glomac IT, because every single one needed help with their cybersecurity, but they had no idea how to go about starting to address that problem. Um, but what I've realized, sadly, after building it for a couple years, is that the solo attorneys, and it's sad, but they are the absolute hardest to to sell. They still don't believe they're at risk. There's so many out there still using you know um, Jordan the attorney at yahoo.com, personal email addresses and stuff like that, which kind of blows my mind. So I don't know where I was going with that, but
I don't know either, but I have literally said that verbatim. Like, it is mind boggling when people are like, hey, pay me $15,000 to like blah, blah, blah at AOL.com. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, I'm never going to do that. No, I'm with you. I mean, let alone the security part. I think from the marketing branding standpoint,
Mhm.
if the branded domain is safer on your end, but from my standpoint, it's commitment to, having the domain, having a company that's going to exist for a long time,
Mhm.
etc. So I love that you touched on that one. So I want to get into some specific takeaways, but you brought up something that's a really good point about these solo attorneys that don't think that they're at risk. What's the normal cost that they should be earmarking towards cybersecurity, or what are the things that they should be paying to put in place?
Good question. So, first off, I want to point out something that, ABA Tech Report says 29% of law firms have been breached. I think it's a lot higher than that because those are the only ones that admitted to it.
Right.
Um, I don't condone this in any way, shape, or form, but I know tons of people who have had something happen, they sweep it under the rug and they try to act like it never happened. They're like, well, no one said anything, so I'm okay. Right. I mean, to make that public, statement that, hey, I was breached and go through everything. Yes, it's a nightmare, but they do have an ethical duty to do it. But I know most are not doing it when it happens. So, it's even higher. And so how much should they be spending? It's a great question. Because it's not, you don't turn on two-factor authentication and you're done. Right. I think that the best approach to a solid cybersecurity stance is really a layered approach. Right. Think of the classic like heist movies, The Italian Job and Ocean's 11. Right. A team of burglars has to get past obstacle after obstacle, each one with its own unique challenge. Right. And then only when they pass through every single obstacle do they get to, they get the valuable jewels and make off into the night. So that's how you build a solid cybersecurity program, to protect your practice and your clients and your data and your livelihood. Um, it's not one and done. Hey, well, Tom said I had to turn on two-factor authentication and I did it, so I'm good now. I'm safe. Having a Mac is not enough, right? My other company is Global Mac IT. We just work with law firms that use Macs, but the threats of today are not the same threats of 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which were primarily viruses back then. So I found a lot of Mac using lawyers have a false sense of security because you're like, oh, I use a Mac, so I'm secure. And that was true 10 years ago. But today, if you fall for a phishing scam, which there's all different kinds, that has zero impact whether you're on a Mac or a PC. So there's a lot of different threats that everyone's susceptible to. So I think a layered security is the best way to go. And what that means is having multiple different types of, protections in place, right? So you're going to start with having two-factor authentication. You want to be using a password manager because if you don't use a password manager, I guarantee the odds are 90% that you're currently reusing three passwords for everything. You've got the first password you set, 15 years ago, which was your dog's name and your kids or something like that. And then the second password is when, one of your websites said, hey, you got to put some numbers in there. It's not secure with just letters. So you said, okay, I'm just going to stick a one at the end. That way it's easy to remember. And then the third password was when your bank said, hey, this isn't, secure enough. You need to have some special characters. So you thought, being a extremely smart attorney, you passed the bar, spent all these years in school, like, okay, I'm going to do what no one's going to think of. I'm going to change the S to a dollar sign. Haha. And I'm going to change that L to an exclamation mark. That's not predictable at all. No one's going to ever guess that, right? And then you started for the past 10, 15 years, you've been using those three passwords everywhere. And the problem is if you that's what happens when you don't have a password manager. So I'll just stop there. And by the way, most of those passwords are probably already on the dark web. So if you gave me your company domain, I could do a scan. I come up with a bunch of results of what's already out there, on the dark web, and I could try to start working into your accounts. I'm
Which
going
I
to
think,
stop and breathe for a minute.
yeah, what I think is really cool along those lines is I know like I've seen it recently on my phone. I would say maybe in the last iOS or two, where Apple will give me a heads up, like when I log into things with the stored password, like, hey, this password was breached on something else. You may want
Mhm.
to change it, which I think is sort of a fascinating counter measure.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. One of the tools that's built into BoboGuard is a dark web scan 24/7, 365. Because what criminals don't get paid, some criminals get paid right away when they breach a website, right? And boom, they pull down 100,000 or 500,000 usernames and passwords. Many other criminals, they don't get paid yet. They get paid when they take that data and they go to the dark web, which is the Amazon for cyber criminals, and they post it. They say, hey, I've got 500,000 usernames from Chase, who wants them? And other criminals come by and they say, hey, I'll take 100,000. Those are fresh. They cost a little more, but there's good ROI on bank credentials. I'll take, 1 million of your Instagram followers and, let's round it out with 50,000 of this. Okay. And then they take that data and they go and they, use it to try to get into accounts and different accounts and all that. Um, so a lot of people don't realize their passwords are already out there. If you're recycling your passwords, you are at a huge risk, and it's just a matter of time until you have a data breach. And again, the speed at which cyber criminals and the tools they have access to and are advancing is mind-boggling. Nowadays, they can get some info. They can go to your LinkedIn page. They can find your name based on your email. They go to your law firm domain. They look you on LinkedIn. They can find, specific information. Hey, Jordan, I know you're from Florida. I am too, right? And they find. I actually just wrote a blog article that's going to go live. It was about the ICP, right? A common marketing term, ideal client profile, right?
Not
Guess
insane
what?
clown posse.
Not insane climb posse. Um, the the cyber criminals are creating ideal client profiles. They know who their ideal target, victim is. Um, they can target them, in bulk, thousands of law firms, tens of thousands of law firms, and they just let their tools and they're gathering more and more data. And they can build a profile on Jordan if they want to try to target Jordan. And they're this is kind of spear phishing is when they go specifically after a single person. Um, but there's a lot of things out there. So I didn't answer your question at all. I just realized, and I'm not trying to talk like a politician. You asked what should they be spending, um, and I kind of went around that because that's essentially why I created Beauregard. Because before Beauregard, the only way for a solo or small law firm to access, kind of these multiple solutions right at once is to go through a managed service provider, kind of an IT company where they do outsourced IT. But the problem is, most of these MSPs, that's what the short term is, they have a minimum of 2,000 or 2,500 a month, right? They have a 10 user minimum count. They don't sell just the cybersecurity package, or if they do, they sell that and then they push really hard to get all the other services and kind of expand, trying to, remove the in-house IT person and so forth. But so they weren't able to afford, there was no other way to get access to these solutions. And it really blew my mind because I Googled and I Googled and I was like, man, I want to find someone that I can send a small law firm with 5 or 10 people to get the cybersecurity stuff addressed, without having to do the entire full, kind of IT package. I found nowadays, especially, I've been in the industry for 16 years, so I went through the embracement of the cloud, and you saw that phase as well, and now it's easier than ever to manage your own technology. People don't depend on IT guys to have an in-house server and manage your exchange, and have to come in and do the regular, very expensive maintenance. So there's more and more small firms and even mid-sized firms who are able to manage their own technology in-house. So they do that well, but when it comes to cybersecurity, they don't know where to start. There's so many different things out there. It's really overwhelming. So I think a good, there's not really a lot of comparisons, and I don't want to just hawk my product, right? But Bobagard is priced at $80 per person per month. It's all month to month, so I think, $50 to $100 per user is a good budget to invest for, proactive, comprehensive cybersecurity. In my mind, kind of like having a cyber liability insurance nowadays, it's just another cost of doing business. 10 years ago, that was an extremely rare policy. Now it's almost a required. Everyone needs to have this because it's not a matter of, are you going to get breached or not, but when. And when it happens, I mean, you want to do everything you can to make sure that when never comes, right? But if it does, you want to make sure you have, the right insurance, because that's the number one reason, people go bankrupt is being underinsured. So.
It's crazy to me. I remember I was sitting at the Law Firm Growth Summit conference in 2020, which will be coming up again in the next couple months with Moshe Amsel and Dream Builder Financial. And there was this lady who came up here and was like, I don't remember her numbers for her yearly revenue. Maybe it was $20,000 a month. No, it was less than that. Maybe it was like $5,000 to $10,000 a month, and she was spending like $500 to $800 a month on IT, and we were all like, that's definitely, yeah. It was
A
like,
lot of
what are
balance.
they doing for you? And so
Mhm.
dove into that. But at the same time, you have a lot of firms that are probably bringing in, $50,000 to $100,000 a month, spending zero on any of this security, and then wondering why there are issues.
Mhm. Yeah, it's you have to. It's just a cost of doing business, and it's a growth mindset. It's an entrepreneurial mindset. I think that's why I think a lot of solos, have a hard time making that investment. But for me, I remember as I grew the company over the past 16 years for Glomac IT, and same thing for Bobagard now. You have to make jumps. The tools that get you where you are today won't get you where you're going. So like having a bookkeeper, we have a virtual CFO now that we pay, $2,300 a month. And that was a giant sum for me, 5, 10 years ago. I'd have never considered it. But now where we are, it's like, well, based on where we are and where we're going, you know, I, I value getting the input and that guidance from experts. I've been able to grow my company to the degree that I stopped being the one who has to do everything, and surround myself with great who's. Like, if we're going to have, we're not going to hire a full-time CFO. We have a team of 15 people. We don't need that, but it's worth getting a virtual CFO, and so you find expert who's. That's what you are for law firms. You're a marketing who, for the guidance and direction and managing. It's like, hey, I want to be a lawyer and focus on practice law and, building relationships and working on the vision of where the law firm is going. If you're managing the practice and you're doing HR and marketing and cybersecurity and technology management and all that stuff, or if your office manager is doing all those different things, it's impossible to do all those things well. Some of them are going to suffer. And so you have to make a decision whether you're going to be able to become an expert and do it properly, um, or if you're going to find an expert and outsource it to get it done. And that's why people hire lawyers, right? Could I practice self Google law? I could try, but I'm pretty sure most lawyers wouldn't recommend it for good reason.
Totally. So it's interesting. You touched on this before about the virus thing, and it's, to me, that's like the computer version of the ozone layer, right? Like, we stopped hearing about it, and I don't know if that's because we solved the problem or if it's just not the biggest pressing issue. So you were talking like that used to be the biggest issue, but now we're more in the phishing thing. Can you kind of walk me through some of the history behind that, the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think it's just the evolution of cybercrime. In order to get a virus, they had to build software that could, break through the walls of computers. Microsoft and Apple, they've got security teams constantly, fighting and pushing back what's being written to get in. But they've got, millions of and billions of dollars behind them to do that. At some point, the cyber criminals are like, hey, the easiest way to get through is that human element. It's generally agreed that 82% of data breaches has a human element that's involved,
Wow.
right? So that's why there's now um, phishing and vishing and smishing and whaling and spear phishing, right? There's all these funny ishing terms, but ultimately they're all just different versions of the same thing, which is phishing. It's a lot easier to con an individual human who doesn't have millions and billions of dollars in security, you know, anti-crime coding and all that stuff. So if you can get one to many, I mean, and there's a lot of psychological stuff at play as well. I believe the good cyber criminals out there are reading Robert Cialdini's influence, and using those insights to do harm. Right? Nothing in and of itself is good or bad, except how the intention that goes behind it. And this is definitely not the good intention that cyber criminals are doing. Um, so it's a lot easier to send an email out to 10,000 people than to try to get a piece of software on 10,000 computers. I think you're going to have much higher success rate on the former. So that being said, there are still viruses. Ransomware is still huge, right? Ransomware is a very real thing. Malware as well. For the Mac users who think they're invincible, um, they're not. We remove malware from our clients' computers on an ongoing basis. We've never had an Apple computer infected with ransomware, right? Knock on wood. But it doesn't mean that it can never happen. And I'm not suggesting that Macs are insecure. I still think Macs are far more secure than Windows. But that's why it's important. You've got to be running virus software that's going to protect you from malware and viruses and ransomware. You've got to be using a tool. If you have more than one computer, if you have more than one person on your team, you need a tool that's going to manage the updates to make sure they happen and tell you if they're not happening. I can't tell you how many firms I've run into with, 50, 75, 100 people, and they're like, yeah, everyone just, we tell them to run updates. That never happens. They're not going to run updates. So you need to install a tool in the background that's got to automate the install of, Mac OS and Windows updates, security patches, third-party software updates, and make that easy. So, because if you just leave it up to the end user of the computer, the Microsoft update always pops up when you're in the middle of something and you hit ignore and you just do that, forever. You've got to have additional tools. There's a cool tool called DNS filtering. And so what this does, when you install it on your computer, it just runs in the background continually. It doesn't really run. It doesn't take a lot of processes. But what it does, there's a ever-growing bank of URLs, domain names that are marked as bad. Like, hey, this is nefarious. So if someone clicks on a link in their email and it takes them to that URL, it'll say this website is blocked. Right? So that one time that someone clicks on a phishing email, even though they never do, it might be blocked automatically by that DNS filtering. So again, it's just an example. You've got, one security layer, making sure your computers are patched and stayed up to date. You've got, virus and ransomware and malware, removal. You've got DNS web protection. You're scanning the dark web. You've got phishing simulations. There's another really cool tool that very few people know about it. It's fairly new, but essentially phishing simulation is a newer solution where you have a trusted cybersecurity partner send phishing emails to everyone in your firm, so you can find out who's clicking on links, who's entering, their credentials, and who needs additional training. And I can't stress
On the day
this.
secret shopper, the secret fisher. I like it.
Yeah, it's a secret shopping program. But I can't stress enough that nobody is exempt. Nobody. Do you know Neil Tyra with the Law
Of
Entrepreneur?
course.
Yeah, love Neil. I think I've been on his podcast 4 or 5 times. I think Victor Medina is the only guy that's been on there more. But I was with him years ago back at MacTrack Legal when he was starting it up, and you probably know Neil as a tech savvy lawyer, right? I would put him out of out of every 100 attorneys, I put him in the top 5% in terms of being tech savvy, right? He likes his technology, and he's one of those guys that would be like, yeah, I'm not going to fall for phishing email. Don't worry, I know what to look out for, right? And the afternoon after he interviewed me for Bobagard, funny enough, he fell for a phishing email.
Oh,
Okay. And
I
it
gotcha.
has it has somewhat of a happy ending at the end because he realized what happened. But essentially, he got an email from a colleague of his. They were working on something, another attorney, and got the email. Email signature was exactly the same. He said, they were working on something. So again, similar as before. He clicked on the link, took him to a website that was a mirror replica, exact copy of his homepage, of his colleague's website. Okay, so he didn't look at the URL closely because he didn't think anything of it. It's like, oh, it's an email from Jordan, and it's taking me to his website, and I see his website, and I've been there before. And so he put in his credentials, and as soon as he hit enter, he's like, oh crap, and he realized what happened. So the good news, He did realize what happened instantly, so he was able to go to 365 or Google, whatever he was using, changed his password. He's been using one password, so he has good password management, and he knows he's like, hey, this is a unique password. I only use this password with my email account, and I've changed it. So he had 100% certainty that he was able to stop it before anything bad happened. But the reason I share that story is because no one is exempt. I don't care who you are. Same thing. I go through the cybersecurity training because I have to stay up to date because I could fall for it too, you know?
Totally. Well, that's like I love the they had the Equifax breach, and it was like, all right, well, now that your stuff's been breached on Equifax, instead of giving you money, we'll give you access to Equifax to protect your credit and your
Yeah.
personal identification. I'm like, why do I trust them? They just got hacked to lose the info, but whatever.
Yeah.
So what we've got let's say a little bit less than 10 minutes left here. How does this play differently with the remote work environment? Does it play differently? Is it better? Is it worse?
In terms of the threat of cybersecurity,
Yeah.
that's what you mean? Oh, it's definitely worse. Because again, it's getting you on your home turf. I was just talking to Craig Bayer with Optiable. I think he does a lot of net documents installs, and he's got a client that started with 10 users. They're up to 150 now, fully remote law firms, right? We've got more and more of these, which I think is great. But he told me, he's like, yeah, they don't have any tools to run updates and keep their computers up to date. So you've got computers that are being monitored far less than they ever were when they were all in house, right? When they were in house, maybe it was the office manager that ran around and manually installed updates on each computer, but at least they were able to do that. Now they can't, right? Cybercrime has shot up significantly ever since COVID started. Now that everyone's working from home, again, step into the psychology. They know what time kids get home, right? They know that Fridays people just want to wrap up. They're more distracted. They're trying to get dinner ready. Kids are running around and they're still trying to do some work, in their little nook of their living room that they have carved out as their workspace, right? And so again, you think about, marketers know the best day and the best time to get the highest open rate, right? We know what's the best time to do a webinar. Typically Wednesday, Thursday at 2 p.m. That's why you and I are talking right now. It's typically a good time to get people to show up, right? So again, cyber criminals are doing the exact same thing. They know what day, they know what time. Do they get the best, phishing, click through and response rates? And so they're definitely tapping into the new changes that we're all living with, working from home, having more distractions and stress and all that stuff. They're preying on our fears. I mean, during COVID, I think the FBI said cybercrime shot up like 100%, with COVID fraud. I just saw a link on LinkedIn the other day saying something about the quantity of idle loan frauds, that occurred. So it's definitely gone up, and it's definitely even more important to provide, cybersecurity training, right? How is that being done now with your remote workforce? Before, they might have brought everyone into an office once a year and gave them a 4-hour cybersecurity training session, but now they're not able to do that. So that's where having all the right tools in place can just raise the bar, because yeah, I'm gonna stop for a sec.
Yeah, no problem. So as we get towards the end, like what else do we need to cover, or what other tips and tricks you need to provide? Like what are the next steps for a firm owner who's like, oh my God, I need to go change all my passwords and set all this stuff up and keep a closer eye on this?
Um, do you mind if I just talk about BobaGuard? Because honestly,
Yeah,
that's the
sure.
only
Go for it, man.
um, the reason I built BobaGuard, like I mentioned before, is because there was literally not a single solution out there that was affordable and comprehensive that solos and small law firms, could get access to. Um, and that was and so I kept looking. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to build it. And so what we've actually done is built 8 of these cybersecurity kind of solutions that you need. And the biggest reason people don't put all these in place, it's like, yeah, that sounds great, I want that. But then reality kicks in, and they're like, I don't have the time. I don't have the capacity to figure out what are these solutions and then roll them out one by one. I'm happy if I can just get 2FA turned on and then get back to work. And so what we've done with BobaGuard is streamline the rollout, of 8 different kind of best-in-class cybersecurity solutions. But instead of just selling, for anyone that's interested, what we've done is put together 4 free resources. And I'm going to share a link with you at the end. But essentially, what they'd get is cybersecurity checklist for busy lawyers. So just PDF report. It has all the tools we recommend. Then we have a 45-minute cybersecurity strategy call where we define their biggest security risks and concerns. We identify the correct strategies that they need to protect their firm. We even build a custom plan to meet their ethical duties and give them peace of mind. And we'll answer any questions they have about their unique situation. The third resource they get is a free dark web scan report. So they'll find out exactly what credentials are currently on the dark web and accessible right now. You're going to be changing some passwords after that. It's going to be a little stressful, but it's
everything is there. It's full on. It's all available. There's no privacy.
yes. And then the fourth thing is a customized cybersecurity plan that's built around the firm's primary cybersecurity risks and concerns, along with a list of recommendations. And so we do that for free. It's really just a service. If there's a fit and it's like, yeah, that sounds good, then you can sign up. Everything's month to month. There's no long-term contracts. I don't believe in locking people into it. We're very high touched, 5-star white glove customer service. Most tech companies, they hide, they don't put a phone number or an email address. You can only chat through their, robot, and it drives me nuts. But at the end of the meeting,
sorry,
Amazon, how hard is it to find that chat box in Amazon sometimes? But at the end of that meeting, they're going to have a much better understanding of the threats, kind of both known and unknown that they need to be protected from. They'll learn the most effective solutions to give them protection, and they'll have a customized plan with specifics. And they can just go to bobagard.com /8. And they can sign up for that, and you can probably put that in the show notes or something like that.
The number 8?
Yep. Yeah. bobagard.com /8.
All right. I'll drop that in there so we can make sure Greg gets it out for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so, and for everybody listening to this, if that's not enough, Tom and his team also host some really good webinars on like all sorts of different topics, bringing in some really cool experts. So one day I hope to be cool enough that they'll have me on for one of them. But certainly Tom is a servant leader, sharing as much helpful information as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think we've got, I think we've got these scheduled in the near future.
Yeah,
I know we're booked out like January.
So. I think we've got a couple of dates going around. All right, so let me talk about our next episode. We'll come back for final takeaway. So next week, next Thursday, 9/26. That sounds like, is that next Thursday? Next Monday. So next Monday, 9/26, 1:45, we'll have Anthony Naro on. Anthony is going to talk to us about TikTok growth tips and starting to market your law firm. He's got a huge following on there, and really is going to walk us through the reasoning for why he went on TikTok, what he does, how he does it, etc. So for any law firm owners looking to begin that marketing journey or interested in seeing if TikTok's a good fit for them, definitely check out on Monday the 26th at 1:45 p.m. Anthony Naro will be back on our next episode of Exhibit A. That being said, Tom, we're not going to let you go without the final nugget of wisdom, the biggest takeaway. So if somebody's been listening for whatever it is, 50 minutes right now, remembers nothing that you said except what you're going to share now, what would be your most important takeaway, biggest piece of advice to help more lawyers be the Exhibit A of a successful attorney?
That's a deep one. I would say, if you've been taking the ostrich approach, kind of sticking your head in the sand, saying, it's not going to happen to me. One of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, says that all progress starts by telling the truth. And so if you want to be honest with yourself, say, hey, this is going to happen one day or another. And then it's up to you whether you want to take the proactive action today and spend, a fraction of what you would end up spending, because if and when it does hit, it's a horrible, horrible experience. I don't wish it upon anyone. Just the amount of stress on your family, your loved ones, your team, your clients. It just, it really, really, really sucks. And so if you want
Definitely
to
one
do
of those.
everything you can to not go through that, take some proactive, action, whether it's BobaGuard or reaching out to your local IT provider, and saying, hey, what are some cybersecurity solutions I can put into place to protect myself? But don't wait until something happens, and you know, don't be like people who put in fire alarm systems after their house burns down.
Right.
Um,
It's definitely an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure type thing.
yes.
All right. So for anybody who's listening to this, we've got the bobagard.com/8 for the free resources. But if they just want to connect with you or the company more, what would be the best place for them to follow for anybody who is listening to this as a podcast so they can't see the links on the Facebook or LinkedIn chat?
Yeah, just go to bobagard.com. They can sign up. We've got a free newsletter called Stupid Simple Security Tips. It's not an SEO stuffed article. I don't go for minimum word counts. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want to make it actionable, specific, and have some takeaways you can quickly, take with you and implement and make you be a more secure attorney. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being with us. And to everybody who has watched or listened to this, we hope you learned a ton from it. I know I did. And we'll see you back next week for Anthony Naro's episode where we learn about TikTok growth tips. With that,
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
yeah, absolutely. So have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll see you soon.